Hi, this is Judy Julin, and welcome to another series of Teens, Tools, and Hope. And today, it's my distinct pleasure to welcome Dr. Marsha Tongel, and she'll be speaking about gift education, a fresh, new perspective, I believe, on what education could be. She's worked professionally in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. And my dear friend Marsha has a Ph.D. in organizational development and organizational behavior. She's got an MS in criminal justice and a BA in psychology and sociology. She's a thought leader, and she's going to tell you all about gift education and what I believe could be and should be, quite honestly, the future of education. So welcome, Marsha.
Thank you, Judy. It's a pleasure to be here. And I welcome everybody to this presentation on gift education. Before I get into the whole presentation, I think it would be helpful if I just tell you a little bit more about myself than what Judy had already offered. I live in Pittsburgh, and I've lived here most of my life. And if any of you have been to Pittsburgh, you can see the wonderful picture of the three rivers there with the bridges. It's a beautiful city. I'm married, and I have 2 daughters and 6 wonderful grandchildren that I love very dearly. And they add a lot of richness to my life. And I love animals, and I have a dog and 3 cats. And now this has grown. I now have, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 6 grand dogs and 2 grand cats. So my family's growing, but in a different way. I have lots of interests. I like to paint and crochet and garden. I love to cook and bake, and especially with my grandson, he likes to bake with me. And I like to read and write a lot. So I'm not going to go back over too much of this. Judy did tell you I have a PhD in organizational development and behavior. The one thing that she didn't mention is I've had quite a bit of teaching experience, and I've taught undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral students at North Central University, Point Park University, Penn State University, Indiana University, and Community College of Allegheny County. And as she said before, I've professionally consulted with private, governmental, and nonprofit organizations through my business, Metanoia Consulting, TCG. So today I want to introduce this concept and talk a little bit about gift education and how it could impact and change education as we know it. And I just want you to be aware that this whole concept kind of was an evolution that came out of my own experience of teaching over the years and teaching at different levels. And what I seen that the educational system was lacking, and actually what I found what students were seeking that they weren't getting. So a lot of this is just, like I said, part of my own experience coming out to share with you. We're going to review a little bit of, very briefly, the history and evolution of education and begin to look at ponder how the time might now be right to move away from the current paradigm that we use for education. Propose some new questions to be asked and outcomes that we need to consider in future education, and envision a little bit about how gift education could possibly be actualized. So why is this important, and why is it important now? Well, we all know that we're in a lot of turbulence and chaos and change, and it's affecting all the different sectors: economic, political, educational, social, cultural, and the environment. And the fabric of our society, our families, communities, educational, health, and economic institutions are all kind of broken and frayed right now. But the one thing we keep trying to do, we're like Sisyphus. We keep trying to use the outdated means to address all this rapid and deep change. So we keep going uphill and falling back downhill because we're really not using the best methods or the best way of thinking about the problems that we're faced with. And I like this quote by Deepak Chopra because it's kind of motivational. All great changes are preceded by chaos. So if we think about, the whole concept of the chaos that we're in right now, it's a great opportunity, and a great opportunity to change things to make the world better. We also got to look at the fact that a new genre of leaders are going to be required to address all the issues that we're facing on our planet and to lead in the future? And how are we really preparing them to be the upcoming leaders to handle all these challenges? And not only how can we prepare them, but how can we support them in identifying and addressing and leading these quantum breakthroughs that are going to be needed to create the kind of change to bring us back to the kind of world that we like. So what our youth are actually saying is we are the emerging leaders and we need your help because we're the future. We need to be heard, but we also need to be supported. William Damon, a professor of education at Stanford University and director of the Stanford Center on Adolescence, asked at one time, do adolescents have purposes? And if so, how do they learn them? What kinds of purposes, in addition to those related to careers, are inspiring today's young? What happens when young people are unable to find any purpose at all to devote themselves to? While our current educational system focuses on achievement, such as getting good grades, getting into college, getting a job, but youth really want to know how to create lives that are meaningful and fulfilling. And Damon states that a sense of purpose requires three things: in how their abilities can serve some aspect of the world's needs, and a feeling of enjoyment in using one's abilities in this way. So it's being aware, looking at how they can serve, and feeling enjoyment and a sense of joy in giving back. So we need leaders at this point that can not only color outside the lines, but are willing to throw away the whole coloring book and to allow new visions to emerge without the boundaries of our current structures. And that includes our educational system. Creating such leaders demands that we move beyond the current educational model into one that can both educate and support the development of our emerging leaders. What we need to consider is education really is an evolutionary process. And if you begin to look at education throughout history, you see that its purpose has been really primarily to always prepare individuals for something that's outside of themselves, for religion, for military, for industry, for the economy. And today, the focus of our system of education is on preparing individuals to fit into skill and capability niches defined by the economic system that is ruled by corporations and markets. And let me digress here just for a minute, because actually this morning I was beginning to think about this a little bit more. And what got me really onto this path was working with a group of students who had never been exposed to these are college students, to problem solving or critical thinking or systems thinking. And I began to realize that a lot of that's intentional, that by not having students learn how to solve problems or learn how to think critically or learn about systems thinking, they can't confront the system that they're being prepared to be a part of. And that's really a very important point when you think about it. I mean, this is taking away some of their individualism and some of their own power as individuals. So educational efforts have been measured by the system's ability to create individuals that meet industries and the economy's needs. My quote on this is, "We've allowed business and the economy to have the right of way to education, but now they need to yield to allow what flows from education to enable the possibility of redesign, not only in business and the economy, but in society as well." So in other words, they need to step back and let's look at the real purpose of education. And this is where we start getting into the intention of gift education. There's two different ways that one can look at education. One is the more formal, systematic, and almost bureaucratic system that we have a process of learning in a very structured environment. The other is that education is the process of awareness and enlightenment, much of which occurs through introspection, reflection, and self-education. So one is very much internal and one is very much external. We have stressed the external more than the internal. So As we moved into talking about gift education, let's look a little bit about what is truly a gift. When you think about when you get a gift, it's generally a surprise, generally a pleasant surprise. It's meant to be unwrapped and opened and used. And a gift adds to our lives some beauty or purpose, but it adds something to our lives in various ways. So, gift is really kind of special when you think about it. And it's even more special when you consider that everyone is a gift. Everyone is born with a gift to share, one which shapes their life purpose, which can add to humanity. And the real purpose of life is for each individual to be able to bring this gift out into the world, to open up their package, so to speak. So what happens when we move from inside out instead of outside in to develop individuals and their gifts and allow that to form the visions for society and the economy? Well, instead of asking individuals to fit into a particular outcome or definition of what we want them to be to meet a particular social, cultural, or economic need, we need to ask them what they can be to create a better world. And what if instead we looked at each individual from this perspective of the inherent gifts that they're bringing that need to be unwrapped, rather than how we can begin to shape them, control them, or move them in a certain way to fit a particular social, cultural, or economic need. As educators, we should be helping each individual to unwrap their gifts by providing them with knowledge, skills, opportunities, and support so that they can actually bring their gifts to light to the world. And as each individual enacts their gifts, society, the economy, and the world will change. And that's truly what I consider a deep spiritual aspect of education. What we need to do is switch the questions that we ask when we think of education. Right now, we ask students and we ask our children, what do you want to be when you want to grow up? Well, what if we ask them instead, how do you want to change the world? Instead of asking, what do you want to learn? What if we ask them, what are the gifts that you feel you have that can contribute to making the world better? And how do those gifts need supported? How can we best support you in bringing out what is so special within you to contribute to the world? Not who do you want to emulate or who is your hero or model, but rather, what would you like to be remembered for? What qualities of character do you want to be remembered for? And these kinds of questions kind of shift the focus. And when you begin to shift the focus, then you begin to realize that you've got to shift the way that you look at education and the way that education is provided. So if we look at today's education, the question is it really relevant? If we look at that quote by John Dewey, I mean, if you think of John Dewey in terms of, the history of education and, what he had contributed, education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. That's a very, very important quote that we should always keep in front of us. And, we always talk about continuing education, lifelong education. We talk about all that, but do we really mean it? What does it really mean in terms of lifelong education? So if we look at this in terms of relevance, education for working in silos in our corporate environment is no longer significant in a virtual, dispersed global business environment. It exploded. Okay, the business world exploded. It's no longer these little factories, these little desks behind the little partitions anymore. We're talking a totally different environment. Education for financial security, as opposed to sustainability, undermines the desire for individuals to continually grow and evolve. It's more important for us to have individuals educate to be able to sustain themselves throughout life rather than, and I'm talking about sustain on all levels, not just financial, rather than our own focus be educate to be able to obtain a certain salary or a certain salary level. Education for specifics ignores the system interconnectedness and interdimensionality of today's world. We're all interconnected now. This is a very large global world. And on our planet, we're all connected. You know, whether it be our cultures may be different, our countries may be different, but there are so many things that we share, and we can't ignore that any longer. Education towards hierarchy is contrary to seeing opportunity for all to grow and change and contribute, and assumes leadership only belongs to a chosen few, rather than everybody has the potential and the right to be a leader. Education to meet guidelines of business and economy ignores that there may be other alternative values, viewpoints, and definitions of success. If you think about growing up, if you're in my age bracket and you think about growing up, okay, the kinds of barometers that were used for success were very much in terms of you attain certain things, you get a house, you earn a certain amount of money, you do certain things. But there's new values, and the new generations now are looking at different kinds of values. Life-work balance, for example, is a very important value to them. Their viewpoints and definitions of being success is being successful in life, not just in business or in their career. So first and foremost, when we begin to think of gift education and beginning to work with individuals, how do we begin to unwrap each individual's gifts? How do we begin to support them? So we need to consider the 5 I's. First is intention. We need to let each individual define their own purpose. We should not be defining that purpose for them. And let me also say that what this does is this allows, especially in terms of youth, us no longer putting them into a certain kind of, what we want to call it, a certain perspective of what we think they're capable of obtaining. Okay. Well, if they define their own purpose, they can just grow from that. And that can be way beyond what our concept is in terms of what we feel that they can achieve. Innocence. You know, it's a principle of nature that allows for self-education. If you allow yourself to be innocent, you allow yourself to learn. You allow yourself to be open. Imagination, this gets back to removing the lines in the coloring book. Foster new visions, new possibilities, new ways of looking at things and doing things, and realizing that they may be possible, that it's not just an exercise in innovation or creativity, but that we're trying to move it to real possibility. Inquiry. Asking questions, allowing our youth to ask questions and seek answers, not just from an educator, but from the whole community. So allowing them to encouraging their own discovery and self-education to go out there and be able to find the answers that they're seeking for the questions that they have. And innovation, provide opportunities to consider and introduce new ways of thinking or doing. In other words, let's not always do it the same way that we've always done it before. Let's actually ask our youth, what are some new ways that you would think would be possible to do this? Or how would you approach this? By doing this, we're beginning to work with them in terms of being able to begin to unwrap the particular gifts that they bring in this world. So if we have different questions, different system, and different outcomes, the outcomes that come is we have the opportunity to develop healthy, balanced individuals. If we think right now of the current status of many of our youth in terms of their mental health, they're being depressed, students now considering suicide and things of that nature, that's really not the direction that we want to continue to go. We need to value our youth. So we need to approach them differently so that they can be healthy and they can be balanced. We would see changes that are needed in our world that could emerge because we'd have new ideas, new thoughts, new skills being brought to light. There'd be development of stronger ties between education and the community. And in a minute, I'll be talking about some of the barriers that we have to break down. But education should not just be structured in one way. Relationships among individuals of diverse backgrounds would strengthen. We could learn from each other. We would grow with each other. And that's what strengthens, that's what strengthens our whole world. Not just our culture here, necessarily even just in the United States, but for the whole world. And by learning from each other, again, we come up with new ideas, new thoughts, new ways of doing things. I was captivated by something I just seen on Facebook yesterday. And this was in Japan. And what they do is, these are like kindergarten children. And they set up a system where you look like you're on a bus. And what they have, they're all sitting there like they're riding the bus. And then they have different people coming on the bus. They have one of the children walks with the cane because he's older, comes on the bus. What do the children do? Well, the one child gives up his seat because of the elder, okay? Then somebody comes on, they put a balloon under a child's shirt who is pregnant, okay? So what happens when this pregnant woman comes on the bus? Wow, you look around, another child gets up and gives that child a seat. What they're doing, and I thought this was so fascinating, it's a whole new way of teaching values. It's a whole new way of teaching interrelationships, respect for others, and especially those who may be vulnerable in our community. I was just astounded, and I thought that was just such a great example of new ways of doing things. Okay, and success would be perceived differently, enabling individuals to feel successful in their own way. Let them define their own success. What does it mean to them to be successful in life? And they'd feel good about the gifts that they bring. But gift education needs a rich environment. There's no doubt about it. And first of all, for gift education to be possible, it has to be rich in experiences, not textbooks, not lectures, not all those, but experiences. And this is where we start getting back, into relating with one another, getting out into the community, seeing different perspectives, doing different things. It should include what I call the 5 C's: creativity, time for contemplation and reflection, which is something we do not encourage many times for youth. We've been doing a little bit more in terms of trying to enhance mindfulness for youth in schools and as a part of education. But serious contemplative and reflective practices are a little bit deeper, and they're very important. Critical thinking. It's so important to be able to see what's going on and to be able to take a stance and say, is this really correct? Is this really the best way to do this? Are there other ways we can do it? So that links real closely with being able to problem solve. Collaborative efforts. So we learn how to work together. We learn how to interrelate and use each other's talents. Not just our talents, but how do we bridge talents between each of us so that we can bring something even stronger to the world. And of course, the whole concept of inclusiveness, cultural inclusiveness, so that we are aware and are accepting of the fact that there's different cultures and different viewpoints, and that they can add something to what we bring to the world. So we have to provide opportunities to learn from each other. We need to change actual teaching from telling to sharing. So much of education now is we're going to tell the student what is right. We're going to tell them what they need to learn. What happens if you shift that to sharing and you begin to talk about, well, when you do it this way, this is what happens, and you begin to share experiences. So education becomes a collaborative process of sharing, learning, and growing from each other. Eliminate separation, whether it's through separate desks in a classroom to separation from the community and through competitive efforts such as grading and assessments. Now, let me talk, right now, when you go to school, you may take a bus, but you're going to go into a building. When you get into the building, you're probably going to go into a separate room. And when you get into that room, you're going to sit at your own little desk. That's all preparation for silos for the corporate world by separating. Okay. If we begin to break down all those barriers, what's potentially could happen from that? And the same thing is, when we begin to only view the capabilities of our youth through gradings and assessments, we're undervaluing them and undervaluing their capabilities. Excuse me, my voice is a little dry. So we need to consider new words and language to describe the whole educational process. Gift education also needs opportunities for real dialogue that allows for diverse viewpoints to be encouraged and accepted. Not just encouraged, but accepted. We need to look at both the relevance and the need of what has been taught, as well as the gaps of what we have missed and ignored in education. And I don't think we do a real good job of that. We keep thinking again that the gaps of what we are not teaching are those things that our economy needs and our capitalistic system needs. But what are the other gaps? It's coming to light now that we're hearing from many youth. Well, I don't have much in terms of life skills. I don't know. I wouldn't know how to do taxes. I don't know how to cash a check. I don't know how to open up a bank account. I don't know how. These are what I mean by the gaps that have been missed and ignored that are critical. We need to remove the hierarchy in education and see students as creators and not just consumers of education. And we need to consider parents, families, and the community as co-collaborators and supporters of the process.
Wonderful.
So gift education needs a rich environment. We need to consider the ecological, social, and spiritual side of education, not just the education side of education, but the whole piece. We need to look at it holistically. And we need to move from educating for the economy to educating for humanity. Big difference. For too long, our educational system has been depriving humanity of its full evolution. It's now time to allow that evolution in all its forms to begin. Thank you for attending today's session. And I appreciate having the opportunity to talk to you about this today.
Bravo! Encore! That was wonderful, Marsha. Thank you so much. I do have some questions if you have a little more time.
Sure.
I love when you explore education as an evolutionary process. And I think that really starts to open up the mind as to a more fluid, a more responsive environment for what can be done. And if you could talk a little bit about the evolutionary process of education as opposed to kind of the structure and the, I mean, I know you spoke of that already, but I'd love to just have you say a few more words on the evolutionary process. And by the way, I love your quotes, and I'm going to ask you if I could start to feature them on social media, because I think your words are so powerful. So speak a little bit about the evolutionary process.
Well, you know, when I think of the evolutionary process, Judy, I think of a couple things. When I think of flow, that word comes out to me. When you think of evolution, things flow. And when they flow, they change. Okay. And I think that is what I think of in terms of the evolution, if that's what you're asking me, the evolutionary process of education. Yes. Whereas opposed to, for example, we're structured by grades in school now, right? So everything has a structure. The desk, the classroom, the grade, everything has a structure. If you take it away and you flow and things evolve on their own, they grow on their own, they change on their own. And there's a certain beauty in that. And there's a certain strength in that. This is so different than what we've become accustomed to in terms of thinking of education.
Yes, and I want to interject here also, Marsha, when you speak about flow and the evolutionary process, you also speak about systems thinking. So you've got this kind of juxtaposition of two modes of being. And if you could speak a little bit to how we begin to explore critical thinking, systems thinking in the realm of flow and organic evolutionary processes.
I'm going to give you an example of what I actually did in a classroom with my students, how I did it. I was teaching undergraduate students, okay? And I asked them, what do you know about critical thinking? What do you know about problem solving? What do you know about systems thinking? They're all shaking their head. It's all new. They don't know what I'm talking about. So what I did is I posed them a pretty deep question. And in this case, you know, I used the criminal justice system because we were, you know, I was talking about systems thinking and how there are so many systems involved, economic, cultural, social, whatever. And I broke them into small groups and I said to them, can society exist without crime? From a systemic standpoint, look at that problem and tell me what you're thinking. They became animated. They started talking. They started thinking. The interesting thing is, when we were all done, and I used this example quite a few times in quite a few classes. I never had a class that said we could solve crime, because from a systems thinking, the way we're set up now, it would cause an economic crash. It would cause social issues. And they began to look at how all this interrelates. So I said to them, you know, we spend so much money trying to prevent crime and to stop crime. We don't really want to do it, because if we do it, all the other systems are going to crash. Well, this was such an eye-opener to them. And that's the kinds of things that I'm saying. Sometimes we've got to put out there questions for them to begin to think in much broader perspectives and just allow them to run with it. What are you thinking about? Okay. Why won't it work? Or how could it work? Or, you know, what happens to this system if you do this? Then they begin to see this bigger picture and they really begin to grasp how everything's interrelated.
Okay, now, Marsha, you're asking this of our students, our future leaders, and I love it. I absolutely love it. How then do we transfer that kind of knowledge or that kind of perspective when you talk about business and economies that need to yield and step back? So you're kind of needing to ask the businesses and the economy to do the same things that you're doing with your youth in the classroom. So how does that transfer over to making it a real life, a reality in the business and economy?
Well, I think what happens is you got to step back, Judy. I think you pose the questions for the youth now. they make it a reality as they become the leaders. So if you begin to say, pose questions about the economic system and is it fair? Is it socially just to everybody? Those kinds of things, and you have them begin to think about this, then they begin to think about the changes that need to be made to make it more socially just, more equitable, more environmentally conscious, whatever it may be. I don't think as adults, and I don't think business as it stands now, you could go in and really pose those questions to them because they're already caught up in the system they're in. What you need to do is start with the younger ones and have them to begin to think about how those systems can change and be better. Does that?
Yes, that goes back to your whole concept of education from the inside out. So
Right.
we're just taking it from the micro to the macro. So it's, rather than try to change the systems of economics or business, let us start to introduce in the youth, our future leaders, these concepts of education from the inside out, everything that you laid out in your plan, and then they will bring that change, and how much more powerful, because you'll have a legion of new leaders. However, and this is something that I'm going to ask you as we get to the end of your wonderful talk, and that is, like, what do you want to leave your listeners with? And so if you think about, how do we even change the education system? Is it all just youth-led, youth-inspired? Don't we need to start to inspire some teachers and administration? So how does that all work?
Okay, I think we are so bureaucratic, Judy, that I'm not sure. Maybe some administrators. I think the important thing would be teachers. I think the other end of it, and we forget, is the parents. The parents are the first teachers.
And the most enduring.
Right. So, I think we start with talking to parents and saying, what do you really want for your child or your youth as they go through this? Okay, what kind of education would you like? Yes, then also teachers. I think once you get parents and teachers, then administrators may come on board. They're so wrapped up in boundaries and policies and regulations and funding. And when you think of all that, that's their coloring book. Okay, that's their lines. They got to stay within their lines. And I'm saying we got to throw the coloring book away. So it's a little hard to ask them to throw the coloring book away when that's where they're living.
Of course. And I love that you say to speak to and inspire and empower parents and educators, because that's what this series is. It's Teens, Tools, and Hope, a parent and educator series. So
right.
the fact that our parents and our educators will get to hear what your proposed ideas are is exactly where you want to start. So I'm glad that we can have a little bit of a hand in doing that for you. So I love what you're saying. I've believed in your concept of gift education. No one has ever coined that term with regards to education, and you are the first, and I'm honored to know you. And if I could ask you, Marsha, what would you like to leave as some parting thoughts to our listeners?
Well, I think if one of the key thoughts that I want to leave people with is, if you have a child, I want you to look at your child truly as this gift and look at how you can begin to unwrap their gifts, their purpose, their skills, their abilities in the best way possible. Because you can't right now, you can't necessarily depend on the educational system. So if you are a parent, I'm challenging you to do it first.
I love that. And Marsha, I'm going to put down in this recording the best way to be in touch with you. Would you just verbally speak your email address? Then I'll be able to put it in.
Yeah, my email address is mtongel@aol.com is the easiest way to reach me. I do have the Facebook page, Legacy. that people can also try to reach me on. But that's the best way. I think the email address is the best way right now.
Well, that's great. I have long admired, respected you, and loved you as a friend and valued colleague. So I thank you for today, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Okay, sounds good, Judy. Thank you.